They say a single decision can change everything. But no one at Ravencrest Industries expected the CEO's decision to fire a quiet, soft-spoken intern to become the headline that would shake the entire city the next morning. Because the name that flashed across every news station was the name of the intern he fired just 24 hours earlier. And what the CEO discovered after that, well, that part silenced every critic in the building and changed the CEO himself forever. This is the story they still whisper about in business circles. The story of the girl everyone overlooked. And the CEO who never forgot her face after the news broke. It all starts in downtown Chicago, inside the infamous glass tower of Ravencrest Industries. A place where ambition smells like fresh ink, stress hides behind polished smiles, and interns walk the hallways like they're stepping through a maze where every wrong turn could end their future. And among them was a girl named Aria Nolan, 19 years old, quiet, polite, always carrying a leather notebook covered with doodles she tried to hide. Most people barely noticed her, and those who did rarely remembered her name, except for one person, CEO Damien Holt. But not for the reason anyone expected. Aria's internship was supposed to be HR big break, not because she wanted power or prestige, but because she needed this job like a lifeline. Every morning before dawn, she took 3 buses across the city, sometimes standing for an hour when the seats filled up. She worked part-time at a diner after leaving the office, and she spent every paycheck caring for her little brother Liam, a fragile boy with a rare heart condition. Their mother had passed 2 years earlier. Their father disappeared long before that. So Aria carried the world on her back, quietly, silently, with no complaints. But life doesn't reward the quiet ones. At least, not at first. That morning, the morning everything spiraled into chaos. Chicago was drowning in a thunderstorm. Lightning cutting open the sky. Water flooding the curbs. One of the buses she relied on broke down halfway. The second one slipped on a flooded street and rerouted. By the time she stumbled into the lobby of Ravencrest Tower, she was 43 minutes late, soaked from head to toe. Her badge didn't scan. The elevators were packed. People stared, and her heart pounded like she had run a marathon. She whispered 2 words to herself as she stepped into the CEO floor. Please, please. But fate doesn't decay requests. Not that day. The moment she stepped through the glass doors of the executive wing, Damien Holt, CEO, billionaire, known for firing people with the same ease other men blinked, turned sharply in her direction. Tall, perfectly pressed suit, expression carved from stone. This was the man who built Ravencrest from nothing and reminded people of it every chance he got. His voice sliced through the room. Miss Nolan, my office, now. Inside the office, cold, modern, a skyline behind him like a silent jury. Damien closed the door and looked at her like she had personally insulted the company's entire legacy. You're late, he said. Not a question. A charge. A verdict. Aria tried to explain. The storm, the buses, the badge. But he raised a hand and cut her off. I don't need excuses. I need reliability. Her breath caught. Sir, please, this internship is done. He didn't blink. Pack your things. The world inside Aya's chest collapsed. Not because of pride, but because she genuinely didn't know how she would buy her brother's medication now. She needed this job like oxygen, and yet she stood there, silent, trembling, swallowing her panic because she didn't want to cry in front of a man who looked like he'd never shed a tear in his life. She lowered her gaze. Thank you for the opportunity, she whispered, and she walked out without letting a single tear fall until the elevator doors closed. What Damien didn't know was that as she packed her desk, every co-worker who watched felt a jolt of guilt, because everyone knew Aria was the hardest worker on the floor. They knew she stayed late. They knew she skipped lunch more days than not. But no one spoke up, and Arya walked out of the building quietly, just like she lived her life. Damien went back to his day. Board meetings, partnership calls, a billion-dollar merger proposal. And not once did he think about the small intern whose name he barely remembered. Until the next morning, when Chicago woke up to an emergency broadcast, news alerts dinging on every phone, breaking headlines across every screen, and Damien Holt, coffee in hand, walking toward the elevator in his penthouse, saw a name on the scrolling headline that made him drop the cup. Heroic teen saves dozens in train derailment, identified as Arya Nolan. He froze. Exactly the way people freeze when the world punches the breath out of their lungs. He turned up the volume. A reporter's voice filled the room. We now know the identity of the young woman who rushed into the derailed metro car late last night, pulling survivors from the wreckage before emergency crews even arrived. Authorities say she went in multiple times despite collapsing from exhaustion. Her bravery prevented a catastrophic loss of life. Damien stared unmoving as her photo filled the screen. The quiet intern he fired. The girl who apologized for things that weren't her fault. Her face bruised, dirt smudged, but determined, holding a child she had saved. He whispered, "No, that can't be her." But it was, and the guilt hit him like a freight train. The reporter continued. Witnesses say she kept saying, "There are more people inside, someone help me." Paramedics report she refused treatment until every trapped passenger had been accounted for. Damien sank onto the nearest chair. A man known for being iron-willed suddenly felt something break inside him. He had fired that girl while she was fighting battles outside his sheltered world that he never even imagined. He didn't go to work that day. Instead, he drove to the hospital, not in a chauffeured car, but alone in his black SUV, hands shaking, mind replaying every second of the day before, her trembling voice, her soaked clothes, her quiet apology, and his cold dismissal. At the hospital, reporters flooded the entrance. He walked past them with a purpose that surprised even him. Inside, he found the room where she rested, her brother Liam sitting at her bedside, holding her hand. Arya was conscious but pale, with scratches on her arms and bandages across her forehead. She looked tired. So tired. Damien exhaled shakily. He had come to apologize. But the words felt too small, too fragile against the weight of what she had done. He stepped inside the room, slowly, carefully, like he was stepping into a sacred place. Liam looked up first. A protective glare. "Who are you?" Arya's eyes opened wider when she saw him. "Mr. Holt?" He swallowed hard. "I needed to see you. I saw the news." Liam stood, still protective. "You're her boss?" Arya whispered, "Not anymore. He fired me yesterday." Liam's jaw clenched. Figures. Damien felt the blow. He deserved it. He took a breath, the first honest one he'd taken in years. "Arya, I'm sorry. I didn't understand. I didn't know what you were going through." She shook her head weakly. "You didn't need to. It wasn't your fault the buses broke down. It's my fault I never asked," he said quietly. Silence filled the room. Heavy, revealing, uncomfortable only because it was real. The doctor entered and shared the full story. Something the news hadn't covered. Arya hadn't just saved people. She had saved a mother trapped under debris, a child pinned by metal beams, 2 elderly passengers whose injuries could have turned fatal if she hadn't kept them awake. And she did it all without expecting thanks. She did it because no one else was inside the train yet. She did it because she couldn't stand hearing people crying for help. Damien realized, in that moment, he had fired the bravest person he had ever met. A girl whose courage dwarfed the resumes of every executive he'd ever hired. He stayed at the hospital for hours, not because he had to, but because something inside him had shifted. Because he needed to understand the girl he misjudged. The girl he underestimated. The girl he wronged. When Arya finally managed to sit up, Damien asked softly, "Why didn't you ever tell anyone what you were dealing with?" She shrugged weakly. "I didn't want pity or special treatment. Besides, people like me don't get second chances." Damien felt something tighten in his chest. He didn't know whether it was guilt or the realization of how blind he had been, or both. He reached into his pocket and placed a folder on her lap. Her eyes widened when she saw the letterhead. Ravencrest? Inside was a reinstatement contract, but not as an intern. A full-time junior analyst position. Paid. Benefits. Remote flexibility when needed for her brother. Everything she should have had from the start. "Why?" she whispered, truly confused. He met her eyes. "Because Ravencrest needs people who run toward danger when everyone else runs away." A pause. "And because I misjudged you, and I refuse to let that be the end of your story." Tears filled Arya's eyes. The kind of tears she rarely let anyone see. Because relief is a powerful thing, and sometimes relief hurts. Liam stared in disbelief. "So, you're giving her job back?" Damien corrected him gently. "I'm giving her a career." The city fell in love with Arya's story. News stations aired interviews. People praised her bravery. Donors offered support for Liam's medical needs. Strangers sent letters thanking her for saving lives. But through all of it, Arya remained Arya. Humble, soft-spoken, still carrying that leather notebook everywhere she went. Still taking buses because she didn't want to spend money unnecessarily. Still showing up early every day after she recovered. Because she never wanted to be late again, even if no one would fire her for it now. Damien Holt, tough CEO, no-nonsense leader, feared boardroom strategist, found himself learning something new every time she walked into a room. He learned humility, compassion, perspective, and most importantly, that true greatness often hides in the quietest people. Months passed. Ravencrest changed, slightly at first, then dramatically. New policies, greater flexibility, support systems for employees facing hardships, mental health initiatives, transportation allowances, scholarship programs. People whispered, "What got into the CEO?" But those who knew glanced at Arya with quiet smiles. Arya eventually rose through the ranks. Analyst, then senior analyst, then junior strategist. Not because of favoritism, but because she had a mind sharper than anyone expected. A mind that had simply been overshadowed by survival for too long. 3 years later, the company held a leadership summit. Executives, shareholders, press, and Damien stood on stage, preparing to announce the annual Ravencrest Honor Award, an award created in recognition of courage, integrity, and service. The first recipient would be a person who exemplified courage that inspired an entire city. The audience murmured, wondering who it would be. A firefighter? A doctor? A philanthropist? But then Damien said the name that had once flashed across national headlines, the name he once dismissed without learning the story behind it, Arya Nolan. She stepped onto the stage, wearing a simple dress and nervous smile. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Some people wiped tears. Even executives who once overlooked her clapped until their hands hurt. Damien handed her the award, a crystal plaque etched with her name, and whispered, "You changed more lives than you know." She whispered back, "You gave me a chance to." And that's the part the news never mentioned. Not just the bravery during the train accident, but the courage she showed every single day. Just trying to survive. Just trying to keep her brother alive. Just trying to work her way toward a future she wasn't sure she'd ever reach. They still tell this story in Ravencrest Tower. Not about the CEO who fired a girl, but about the girl who taught a CEO what leadership truly means. Because sometimes the person you overlook is the person who will inspire the world the very next day. And sometimes the biggest mistake you make is underestimating someone whose courage runs deeper than their circumstances. This was Arya Nolan, an intern dismissed by a powerful man, a hero discovered by a city, and a voice that forever changed a company's heart.